Welcome to Ops or Die, the podcast for people that know ops isn't sexy until it saves your ass.
Well, welcome, Sean and Stacy. Thanks for joining us today for our Ops and Die podcast. Why don't we just start with some introductions? If you can tell us more about yourselves and about SingleFile.
Sure. Well, I'll start off. My name is Sean Flynn. I'm the Chief Legal Officer and co-founder of SingleFile Technologies. It's a company started back in 2019 as an online filing and registered agent platform to help companies automate and take away those headaches that are associated with day-to-day compliance. And it's really work that people shouldn't have to be doing, that systems are ideally adapted and suited to take over. And we've created services and a group of experts to support those services to make their lives easier. And Stacy?
Yeah. So my name is Stacy DeLong, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at SingleFile. Relatively new to the startup world, but not new to the marketing world. I've been a veteran marketer for over 20 years, mostly on the B2B front, but also a little bit on the B2C front as well in financial services. I made it to SingleFile having a past relationship with our CEO. We worked together in a past life. So when it was time to expand the marketing function here at SingleFile, it was definitely a good match, having had a great working relationship in the past. So very excited about what we've been able to do here in the last year or so, and ultimately what we have in store for 2026 and beyond. So Katie and Maria, appreciate you guys having us. We're excited. We're excited to have the conversation today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, so just to get, I think the conversation started. So how does SingleFile think of operations versus product?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, we think of ourselves as providing tech-enabled services, and really what that boils down to, we provide services to companies, but we facilitate that with tech. And as we started the company, we were light on tech and high on the services end, right? And so you can see where this is going operationally. But that's how the industry was. That's where we were starting from. Our competitors were low on tech and high on services, and they essentially expanded by hiring additional headcount. And creating some processes around that, but the sort of technical infrastructure and the systems infrastructure is relatively light. So, what we realized very quickly is that by combining sort of well thought out processes and systems with experts or individuals who may not have deep industry expertise, but made up for that with enthusiasm, open-mindedness, persistence, dedication, attention to detail, and customer oriented, that really made a good fit and made it much easier for us to scale as a business. So, the whole delivery of the product is a combination of that technology and those people driven services. And what customers see, they're not necessarily differentiating, what is manual in the back end or what isn't. And so those two need to really work well together.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And it's fascinating the way you talk about like services heavy to kind of more in the product space, because I feel like a lot of consulting and operations consulting specifically is moving in that direction, where we start services heavy and then they're being turned into products, because this is a space where I think we agree that there's a lot of there to be able to turn it into more of a product. So
absolutely. The funny thing is, the more we move in that direction, paradoxically, the more important that human touch becomes, because it's that interaction with the person that our customers remember and that they refer to when they give us testimonials or they make referrals or what have you. But, we're able to free them up to spend more of that time by automating those things in the background so they can be, they can put a better use to their time.
Yeah, and that's so important. And I think that hybrid services product model is what is coming, because
Yeah.
we all come from that services side where we're used to a ton of meetings
Yeah.
and a ton of like work and lots of hours and billables and things like that. So we're good with customers. That's
Yeah.
not the issue.
Yeah.
But that handoff to a product that really works for them, so they don't have to spend that amount of time. So they don't have to. It's not billable hours. It's very considered and an expense that they can plan for, I think. That's what, going back to my financial background, I think that's a big thing that sticks out for me is planned expense. So off of that, and specifically about this scaling and moving into that
Sure.
hybrid and more product side,
Yeah.
what are the lessons you learned from scaling, and what obstacles did you encounter during that process?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is another great question. Um, and it's probably a truism that you guys hear all the time, but really it is do not underestimate the importance of people and systems, right? And it's not just people and systems, it's the right people and the right systems. A perfect example is finance. I know before we were starting, we were talking a little bit about that. And in terms of what sort of stacks you guys build for companies coming out of the gate, we started with a part-time accountant using QuickBooks. And the nature of our business is we're B2B, but we have a lot of small transactions. And so very quickly, this accountant who was used to creating invoices for every single transaction was getting overwhelmed. And so like how do you, and one of the things we ended up churning through a bunch of, and when I mean churn, it wasn't, they burnt out or anything, but it was the wrong fit in terms of people in our finance department, which is now 4 or 5 people, I think, and we're looking to transition to a new billing system. So it's really, but that was the last thing I was thinking about. Like when you were starting, that's
Yeah.
right. Engineers want to work with Stripe. It's easy to do, right? QuickBooks, easy to do. We're at this incubator. They recommended this accounting person who's a wonderful woman. Good fit, easy to work with, but she quickly became overwhelmed and our systems just became overwhelmed. And but it was always kind of the last thing you thought about until it became the first, right? Until it was like, well, what do what are our receivables look like? And why haven't we been able to get invoices out? And why haven't people been paying because they've been getting the wrong, all these things that you just think of as details are the important details. And we didn't think about it strategically. We didn't think about it, long. We were thinking about it in terms of like next week instead of like next month, next year, and next quarter. And I think, that was something, had I to do it all over again, I don't know at this time in my life I could do it all over again, but had I to do it all over again, we would definitely be much more deliberative in terms of what we picked and how we staffed it and how we organized ourselves so that we wouldn't, it's that whole changing the tires or the engine of the bus while you're going down the highway. Like that's how it feels sometimes. And it would be much better to have the right engine in the bus when you're kind of pulling out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, John, that immediately jumps up, because the one thing we keep on hearing is how the agents you just need one employee and everyone can be digital agents.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's going to completely do all the work for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's your view on that, talking about the right mix between people and technology?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think at least from where we're sitting, the perfect mix is technology that really enables people to be more productive, getting them the right information at the right time. And whether or not that is taking care of processes that they don't really need to be involved with, or taking care of steps which are really like cutting and pasting, or going from one system to another, porting data from one system. There's a bunch of different things that if you were to just map somebody's activity hour by hour, you'd see all this kind of rote work, which kind of puts you in mind to those old schoolhouses where they're just writing down on tablets and everything, and in some ways it feels like we haven't advanced that much. But I do think that from a system standpoint and from an agentic standpoint, there's a lot more room for improvement there. But the people aren't going to go away. They're the ones who are making the higher level decisions. They're the ones who are interacting with customers. And in our case, we also have regulators. So there's like another party that we interact with, government. And you don't necessarily want agents interacting directly with the government either. So, there's definitely room for people in the organization. I think what it really means is building that foundation to make them as productive as can be. And and then the other piece of it is we're fully remote. And so how do you design an organization and interactions that are collaborative, supportive, real time, but also allow for the fact that someone's going to step out to run to an errand, or the garbage man's coming up behind us, or those sorts of things. So it is one of those interesting, I think, points in time where technology can play a great role in terms of making us all more productive, and so that we're not just. But I agree with your premise, or at least I think it was your premise, Maria, that technology is not going to take over all this stuff. It's not going to be agents just kind of sitting in them, and just churning out work with like one person giving them prompts, right?
Yeah. Go
Oh,
ahead,
sorry,
Stacey.
Lauren. No, I was just going to jump in there. I firmly believe everything that Sean just said. From an outsider's perspective, I think one of the things that has been most exciting to sit back and watch is the organization embrace technology. I mean, especially on the AI front, right? I mean, obviously it's been around for a while. I would say it's full steam ahead in the last 6 to 12 months, right? It's been sort of ingrained in pretty much everything that we do. So peripherally being able to sit back and sort of watch all aspects of our organization sort of adopt it and think about how they can work smarter, better, faster, and really focus on those more value-oriented tasks, as Sean mentioned, has been really exciting to see, right? And we know that every day there's an enhancement. And I think, where organizations, what I love about the podcast is, the name is like you either are on board or you aren't, right? I mean, that's really the key. And if you're not, you're not going to be on board, you're not going to be on the train long, right? Because it's going to move ahead. And so just being able to see sort of the broad level of acceptance from the organization is really exciting because, it's a scary thing, right? I mean, the very first thing that oftentimes people will think about is how will technology displace me? How will it do away with my job? How will it, all of those things I think are the immediate things that pop into most people's head. And so seeing the organization really embrace it and really sort of redefine their roles within the organization and sort of their day to day has been really, really exciting to sit back and watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as we like to say, operations isn't sexy until it saves your ass. And it's really true. I mean, and that's where, but you still need that first mover, right? Like that has to be a human. And the last mover, honestly, has to be a human. There's a lot of there that we talked about for that in between space of like, there's a lot of manual grunt work that we don't need to do anymore. Technology is at that place, but the displacement isn't there, and I think that's the fear, right? The change fear that everyone's kind of going through right now. And so because we have you here, Stacy, I have a question from a marketing kind of perspective of like, how do you address that fear, especially with a platform like SingleFile, which is doing a lot of that grunt work, right? Without making people terrified. How do you talk to that fear?
That's a great question. I think probably the most compelling thing is because technology, because the infiltration of AI is in all aspects of our lives, it's quickly raised people's range of acceptance at a much quicker pace than I think we would have historically saw, right? I mean, even I would say 9 months ago, one of our primary customer segments is legal, right? And there are a lot of conservative legal entities out there that are, we're scared of the word, or the abbreviations of AI or technology, right? So not only did our staff, especially our frontline and our ops staff, have to embrace it, they also had to sort of serve in this consultative role, right? As they're having these daily interactions. And I think that that's where the people portion of this comes into play, right? Is they can put our customers at ease by letting them know how we've embraced technology and AI on our front, and how that can sort of infiltrate their own businesses and their own work lives, and leave them assured that their data, their information is even more protected than it ever was before. And so to me, that's really been a selling point, right? From a marketing perspective, I think that's been the magic of being able to weave the people and the technology pieces Sean mentioned together, and really let people know that while we are utilizing technology to accelerate our business, we're enabling our people to do even more value-based tasks, because we've kind of reduced that administrative burden and those mundane tasks off their plates. And that same message applies for our customer base as well.
Yeah. I'm curious, just getting a bit back to SingleFile. I'd love to come back to some team questions for scaling as well. But when you look at compliance, what is it about it that makes it so hard for companies, and what are the major risks involved around it that founders, and especially as they think about scale and expanding team and expanding markets, need to think about?
Yeah, I think one of the attractive things about compliance from our perspective is there's a myriad of rules, and there's only going to be more, right? And there's a regular periodic requirement in many cases to have to continue to do something, to update, to report, what have you. I like to differentiate between what I call big C compliance, like I've got a banking charter, or I've got a license with a nuclear regulatory authority, versus I am registered to do business in the state of New York, and I am registered with the Department of Revenue in New York, and with the Department of Labor, and with the City of New York, and that's the kind of the little C compliance, which can create a whole bunch of paper cuts, but can also can lead to serious fines. It can interrupt any sort of business transactions if you've lost good standing in a particular state because you haven't kept up with your regular reporting requirements. You might not be able to enter into a contract. You might not be able to avail yourself of the courts. You could ultimately lose your ability to do business in that state. So there are these things, and I think part of the difficulty is, one, knowing what those obligations are, and two, they grow exponentially as you increase your footprint. And so if you have one or two states, okay, fine, my finance person, and maybe I have a compliance person, depending on what industry I'm in, can stay on top of that. But often what happens is it's no one's full-time job. It's what they do in addition, right? We've had instances where the office manager for a fairly large real estate investment company was responsible for this stuff. and, very kind of earnest, well-meaning individual, but didn't come from that background. And it was in addition to doing things that she had to do, like order snacks for the break room, right? So, like, and to some extent, that's
snacks, state filings, same thing.
And that signals how they value it, right? I mean, whether that was a conscious decision or not, that signals how they value it. And I think it's because they think, oh, well, if I miss it, I can always get back in. But it's that kind of cumulative effect of missing a lot of it. And then once, the horse is out of the barn, it's just a mess to clean up, right? So I think that's also a big part of it is it increases in complexity very quickly as you increase your footprint or the number of different legal entities you're managing. And that's where it really does become a headache. And it's not dissimilar to what we were talking about right out of the gate here in terms of, finance and billing, these things that you don't give a lot of thought to. But then, you're at a certain size, and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Right.
Yeah.
And how do I get my arms back around that? And I think that's what happens a lot of times. It's certainly what we see.
I think to Sean's point as well, one of the things that our CEO often says is, compliance, there's three things about compliance, right? It is mandatory, it is recurring, and it is perpetual, right? There is really no end in sight. And I think that, there are very few things that are those cases, right? Our personal taxes, there's some of those sort of individual obligations, but to Sean's point, the more entities that you're managing, and you start triangulating that complexity, and it just kind of compounds on each other, so it can get unruly very quickly. And I would also say, and Maria, you brought this up earlier on as in our conversation, post-COVID world, right? I mean, from a talent recruiting perspective, right? Hybrid work environments, remote work environments, that's really the new norm. So having, as an organization, having employees in a multitude of states, right? There's no more of this traditional, I work for this company in this state and this state only. And, these are the sorts of things that we have to deal with. And so that, just even from a company perspective, those are the sorts of things that have to be considered or thought about. And to Sean's point, it generally is not just one person's job. So having a multitude of hands in the pot, so to speak, that can compound things as well. And that's where things oftentimes get missed.
Yeah, and we know this firsthand. I mean, we're in 20 plus states because we have employees in 20 plus states. And so, we've got, and we're, a relatively young organization, but, we spend some time making sure that we are fully compliant with all the regulations in those particular jurisdictions.
Yeah, and I think I will say, from my own background, I was definitely one of those people who was given a job and then was like, oh, also just do this.
Yeah.
And that's how I came into ops. Like I was doing accounting and HR and then it was just like, oh, we'll do this too. Just do this once a year. And it's the problem of just, right?
That's right.
Of saying like, well, this just happens once a year. So just anyone can just fill out the paperwork. Right. And it's like, just is not a word here. But I tend to think of it as the leaning tower of hats that you wear, right? Yeah. If you can take one of those hats off, and I want to go back to something I think that Stacy said, it's the value of work, right? Mm-hmm. It's if you can stop doing the minutia, if you have a helpmate for that minutia, then the value of the work you're getting done increases because you have that helpmate. And that's what I love about what SingleFile is doing is, I've filled out these pieces of paperwork and it isn't overwhelming.
Yep.
If it's done, but making sure you do it and making sure that you do it on time and making sure that everything's filed is so integral. So I do want to go back to something you said, Sean, is you talked about fines.
Yeah.
And I think some people don't understand the complications that can happen
Yeah.
if you, either with small c or big C,
Mm-hmm.
it can shut you down. And so
Mm-hmm.
for our audience, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's helpful for them to have a little larger perspective about how difficult this can be. So if you have an example or something that you can talk about, of what those can really look like.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know firsthand of an organization that it's we are in a challenging financing environment, right? And I'm sure you work with lots of clients who, you've got certain runway and you've got a window, and interest rates being what they are and tariffs being what they are and the general political system being, or environment being what it is, it's you're kind of threading the needle to get somebody to say yes. And there's an example of a company um, that was negotiating some bridge financing, and they had to postpone their closing because they couldn't meet their reps and warranties that they were all in good standing in the jurisdictions where they were licensed to operate. And they at the time, I'm sure they thought, well, what is this? How do it? Why? And I'm sure it was because of just what you said. It was just another thing for somebody to do in addition to everything else that they had to do, and it was never a real priority. And no one really thought that, oh, this is important because this 40-page bank facility agreement got this rep and warranty section, and it says that the CFO or the CEO has to certify that we're all, and they couldn't sign it. Like they couldn't sign it. So things like that occur. And there's another instance where there was an organization that was operating in a Northeast state, and they missed their filings for the annual report, and they actually lost authority to operate in that state, which is something you can again reinstate, but somebody swooped in and took their name. And so they could no longer use their name. Now they had a trademark, but still, they don't have the, so, these sorts of things happen when you take, and the thing is, it's not that hard as you say. It's just a question of being organized, having the data in one place, keeping track of the time, knowing what to file, all these things that if that were the only thing you were doing and you had all the time in the world you can do, but systems and technology can help with that. And that's really the sort of vision that we're selling.
Yeah. That all in one place for the data. I just want to highlight that comment
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's a huge piece of this that
Yeah.
people just don't think about. Like, I don't know how many times, and I'm sure you guys have seen it on your side as well,
Yeah.
that you're dealing with a company that has 42 plus platforms, all holding pieces of data that sometimes don't match. I feel like what could, and that hurts compliance as well. And I
That's
think
right.
people don't realize that. Like,
That's right.
what system are you looking at, and what are you filling out this form from? Because that can delay it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the modern corporation still works in almost, entirely on email, right? And you get attachments, which by their nature are dated, right? And so you open the attachment when you think it's the latest and greatest, and no, it's as of when that was sent, or, even before that. And so somebody in tax will have an org chart that, somebody in legal knows is out of date, but they don't know that the tax person's looking at it. And so, so this sort of stuff happens frequently.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, and so it sounds like from the example you mentioned that companies can actually unintentionally dissolve themselves if
Absolutely.
they're not careful or come inches from it because of one
Absolutely.
misfiling.
Yeah. Yeah.
What actually happens behind the scenes when a company dies on paper like that? And how do you help them prevent
Sure.
that case?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, So it depends on where that happens. If it happens in their home state, so very quickly 101, to create a legal entity, you file a document in a jurisdiction with the state secretary of state. That act, once it's been approved by that division, creates the legal entity, the corporation, the LLC, that sort of thing. And then if you are operating in additional states, you register to do business. The most important act is that first one, the formation, because that is the counterparty to all your documents, to your employment agreements, to your vendor agreements, to your customer agreements. That's the entity that's issuing shares to your investors. I mean, that is the key. If that should dissolve, be administratively dissolved, which is what happens in the state of Delaware if you haven't paid your taxes for 2 years, then poof, there are no counterparties for all those agreements.
Wow.
Technically, all the shares that those investors have paid for don't exist. Now you can reinstate in some cases, but for a period of time that ceases to exist legally. And in a country where economic rights are underpinned by sort of legal infrastructure and rules, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say I have been through this with companies
Yeah,
myself where compliance has been not ignored, but deprioritized.
sure.
Reinstatement. I've done it both in Colorado and in California. It is not fun.
Yeah, yeah,
And it requires a lot of, you want to talk about hours of just, oh my gosh, I
yeah.
don't know how many hours I've spent at the FTB office, which I have to say, for all of those of you listening, if you've had interactions with the FTB, the people are very wonderful.
Yes.
The systems and policies,
Yeah,
perhaps less so.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it is an ordeal, and they will try and desperately help you, but it's a limited amount of people
yeah,
who can move a immense amount of paperwork through this system. And so, if you don't have to do this, if you
that's
can
right.
use single
Yeah,
file to stop from getting there,
yeah.
highly recommend. Like, cannot give 10 out of 5 stars, because it will eat your soul.
Well, and I think what you had said, Katie, well, both Katie and Maria, is really important, right? Oftentimes, this becomes one peripheral part of a person's job that they don't have time for initially, which is likely what led to the disillusion or the stepping on the edge of the cliff, if you will. And so, you think about that, but then to your point, Katie, it's the acts preceding that. Once you have found out, right? It's the reinstatement. It's the other activities that have to happen. It's the research time. It's the effort. It's all of those things. So, you think about the amount of money that is being spent, you know, on that portion, right? The oopsie, we found this out and now we have to get back to where we need to be. It more than pays itself to be proactive and to use services like we have at SingleFile, enabling people to say, it's a bit of a safety net, right? It is
Yeah.
would you rather spend a little bit of money on the front end and to ensure sort of that net, if you will, versus the time and effort and complexities and laborious acts that have to happen when you get to a point where you're like, "Ooh, I missed something." So
Oh, yeah.
that's super critical. Is that is our goal, is to keep people off the edge of that peripheral cliff, to Maria's point, where they don't end in near dissolution or in bad standing or miss one of those super critical steps in their business, or you know getting to the closing time of a bridge loan and realizing, oh, I can't do this, right? And what's the added expense of rescheduling and, any costs incurred or any, paperwork or filing that has to be done again, because now you have to go and do, the compliance related items that you might have missed. So
Yeah.
just a couple of things out there.
So what on average are some of the costs of these mistakes, apart from the fact that they might be completely dissolved and that has a whole bunch of other
Sure.
impacts around them that can be avoided?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if so, we work with a lot of companies that were formed in Delaware. Until very recently, it was kind of the no-brainer for anyone who is going to be creating a new company that had any visions of scale or taking on outside investment. Now you're starting to see a couple of other states try and throw their hats in the ring there, but for the most part, still Delaware is kind of that gold standard. And Delaware has a franchise tax requirements, and if you miss your franchise taxes, so for corporations, it's due March 1st, and for LLPs and LPs and LLCs and partnerships, it's due June 1st. There are severe penalties that accumulate month to month. And there's a one-time fee and then sort of monthly interest that accrues. For LLCs, it's $300, then there's a $200, and then there's interest. But for corporations, you could have tax penalties. I mean, you can have tax bills themselves in the tens of thousands of dollars, and then you add interest on top of that, and you play that forward. It can be very expensive to get, the filing piece is the easy part. It's really the fines and the back taxes that can really break the bank when it comes to a Delaware corporation that's missed its tax payments. So, I mean, that is one of the principal costs of it. The research and the filing and whatnot, we take care of, and it's probably under $500 or something, to really kind of cover that. And everything we do, we provide the guidance and all that sort of stuff. We don't have hourly charges for that. But it's really kind of on the state level that it hurts.
So if a company is coming to you already in a hurting situation, and they come to SingleFile,
Yeah.
so you, I think what I took from that is that you'll help them.
Oh yeah, no,
back
totally.
to square.
Look, I mean, we want you to get on the right side, and we want to help keep you on the right side, and we're happy to do that. I mean, in some ways, the people who are on the other side of the proverbial phone at SingleFile are people who like helping folks solve their problems. And if we need to call somebody in the Division of Corporations at Delaware and talk through what needs to happen, then they'll do that. If they need to get tax clearances in other states to get reinstated, like New Jersey, they'll do that. So, that's all part of, and that's, and that's what they like to do. I mean, that quite frankly is kind of part of the job. So yes, we're happy to bring on new customers who need that sort of help, and we think we can, not only get them back in good standing, but keep them there, and as they grow, help them move into other states and other jurisdictions.
And I think just to layer into that, I think that goes back to one of our earlier discussion points around how technology is allowing us and our staff to be more efficient, right? I think our frontline staff welcomes those challenges of
Yes.
helping people, right? And those are some instances where technology may not be, at first and foremost, the thing that's going to help those nuances, to Sean's point, making a call or advocating on behalf of our customers, right? And I think those are huge loyalty builders, right? That's what's creating customers for life, and that's why we see, such a strong, year over year acceptance rate into SingleFile services, right? Because there's that sort of proven output of help, and there is no judgment, right? Everyone might have arrived at that situation a different way, right? It could have been because they tried tackling it on themselves, because they relied on another, someone else, whatever it is. our first and foremost goal, to Sean's point, is to get that organization back in good standings, and to give them a sense of relief that that's not going to happen again. And that I feel like the single file platform first and foremost puts that out in front of them, is to make sure that those critical compliance moments in their entities' lives is not missed. But rest assured that there is the human element behind that as well, that if something were to go awry or if something were to be missed, we're going to be there to help them out.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and so for our audience, just to highlight, if you're terrified, if you know that something bad has happened and you have no idea where to start, now you have a place to start, and you don't have to be scared. You've got help out there. So, Sean, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say one of the sort of early inspirations when we were thinking about this company was the observation that other forms of back office operations, payroll, finance, has been automated. There are systems out there, right? There's, business process automation is not a new thing. And what we've simply done is kind of turn that on to the area of compliance to build things at scale that you couldn't build yourself, right? And then give you the benefit of that. So just like there are other sort of tools that you can bring in-house to help you manage other operational things, that's what this is for compliance. And that's how we think of it.
Yeah, and that's great.
So if you can think about the weirdest, most avoidable compliance mistake you've seen a startup make, where you thought, I cannot believe this is legal adulthood. Are there any examples like that and things like that should be outlawed?
Well, I mean, it's not uncommon for somebody who, I said when you form in a state and then you register in another state. And it's not uncommon for somebody to go and say, okay, I need to register in Maryland. But instead of registering, they form another entity with the exact same name in Maryland. And so not only, is that legal entity just sitting out there by itself with no employees, no assets, no, it's not part of any contracts or whatever. It's just like a freestanding thing. They aren't, the mothership, if you will, isn't legally operating in the state of Maryland, right? So, and then they've got they've got 2 reporting requirements. And so it is actually more common than you think for people to go form multiple entities when in fact, what they meant to do is just register these things in different states. So we see that a lot.
I have to say, coming from my background doing this in multiple states, this is another place where I have to call out the joy of being in California, because one of the things I love is the Secretary of State's site in California is better than almost any other state I've seen, as far as being very clear and very easily accessible to the information of how do you do this. I still would say go with help, go with SingleFile, go with someone who can help you do that. But at least here in California, there is more help than I have seen at other places. I've been on some Secretary of State site, and I'm like, why is this even a website?
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of another one we've seen, and we get all sorts of requests about. Well, we have a customer who large company, and he uses. I'm going to get this word wrong. I always have trouble. Mnemonic tool to remember the names of the entities. He doesn't even have them on a spreadsheet. He's just keeping this in his head. And in the course of a conversation, Aaron was telling me about this the other day, Stacy. In the course of a conversation, I go, oh yeah, there are these ones too that you guys should be looking after. And it's a large organization. And so, you just kind of stop and pause and say, well, we can help with that. But if this is going to be kind of like your old Sudoku, kind of keeping your brain young and pushing it to the limits and stuff, I don't know that that's the best use of those cycles. But so that happens sometimes where they're like, no, I got it. I totally get it. It's like that conversation you have with your spouse. Should we be writing down a shopping list? Or you got, no, I got it. I got everything. We got it. Yeah.
I had that conversation just a couple days ago.
Yeah. I'm usually on the receiving end of that. So I'm here. Yeah.
And Katie, to your point, I mean, think about that. I mean, back to your reference on the California Secretary of State's site, right, being organized and one of the more robust, or well thought out, right? Think about people that have to navigate and try to do that on their own in 30 states, and there really is no sort of um, common thread, if you will, right, on the way that the sites are structured,
Yep.
the navigation,
Yep.
Where you go, the instructions, that's left up to the states to, own divide. So, think about that and in the complexities that causes, not necessarily just because you may know what you need to do.
Yeah.
It's finding it, it's, filling it out, it's submitting, it's filing. And, I think that's oftentimes the understated part of what SingleFile will do is sort of understanding those nuances and understanding those sort of jurisdictional nuances, whatever that might be, in order to ensure that you don't have to. And, I think that's super critical because, that would be like going and, trying to find the right pair of socks on 15 different websites, right? I mean, you're going to get there a multitude of different ways, right? You might get there because it's featured on the homepage on one site. You might get there from a backlink on another site. It varies from site to site. And so, I think that you're right. I mean, especially in managing multiple entities across multiple jurisdictions, that's truly where it gets cut, where the complexity starts to set in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
another example, just quickly before I forget, where you talk about common mistakes, and this dovetails with what Stacy is saying, is there's a requirement in many states that you list your officers and directors or managers and members, and there's usually a space to provide the address. A lot of people will put the personal address. And in most cases, you do not need to put your personal address. So, for those people out there who are, because this is publicly available information, who don't necessarily want an irate customer or competitor or what have you to know where you live, knowing that you can use, in many cases, the business address instead is like a key piece of knowledge that, when we're working with customers and we see a personal address, we'll tell them, "Are you sure you want to do that?" But the California site's not going to tell you that. So
No, it definitely does not. And
yeah,
that is very true. I've definitely worked with companies who are like, "Oh, here's my personal address." I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
this is searchable.
yeah,
Yeah.
Like, I'm just saying, like, just heads up here.
yeah,
But yeah, no, that's very valuable. I think we've talked about a lot of hard costs during this conversation, the fines, the fees, and things like that. But I think a piece to these points is soft cost.
yeah,
Your time is not free.
yeah,
It's not $0. The soft cost of the space that lives in your head when you're trying to go to sleep and you're terrified.
yeah. That you've forgotten something.
That's a cost. That's an emotional cost
Mhm.
of these things, and those costs can as easily dissolve a company as anything else. So finding something that can help you at SingleFile is just, it's so great to have this thing that you can just basically take all those soft costs and hand them off and say, "Help."
Yeah, yeah,
Take
And
this
that
away.
and that also comes with, I think, the point around business continuity management. That's the conversation I constantly have with
yeah,
founders. Is like, you always have to consider life happens.
that's right.
Hopefully a bus doesn't hit you in the
Right.
morning, or chronic disease or something where someone from a key person from the team need to step away. And this is what I love about what SingleFile does is really it brings that business continuity management in place around where all the filings and things sit. Because I'm thinking about that executive you were talking about where where they are the only point of all the knowledge of where all the entities sit. If something happens to that person, it can really delay revenues and everything for the company anywhere from 6 to 12 months quite easily, and that's another soft cost which needs to be considered.
Absolutely. I think having that kind of centralized repository of that key corporate data that people within the organization have access to, that trusted advisors have access to, so that if there's activity that your law firm or accounting firm or whatever is undertaking, that you have full visibility and transparency into that. That's very important.
Yeah,
and limiting those discrepancies, I think
that's right.
Also, so we're getting towards the end of the podcast. So before we close, Sean, Stacy, what is one thing that you really want listeners to take away from this talk about compliance and using technology?
Stacy, you first, since you're nodding.
That was an active listening. That was an active listening trait. I would say this, Katie. I think, I would imagine that the range of listeners for the podcast varies, right? And I think that everyone owns a piece of compliance. I think that's really the key, right? From the organization. Just because someone has the responsibility doesn't necessarily mean that every single individual doesn't play one small part. And that could just be operating, a portion of the business, right? And the delays that could come from that. So, for me, I think the thing that I would want people to take away from this is, knowledge is power. I think that's really key. And I think being aligned with experts who are disciplined in order to be able to help remove that administrative burden from you, your organization, your company, your entity, whatever it might be. I think that's super critical. And, I kind of go back to what you said. In my mind, compliance, the soft costs probably occupy more headspace or mind space in compliance than really the actual costs themselves, right? It's, the cost to file, the things that need to happen there really are not astronomical, right? But it is the thinking about what happens if, or what if I don't do this, or what if I miss this, that will far surpass that. And in my opinion, that's where SingleFile really comes in and quite honestly can help save the day.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can top that. Wow. So I would say that from my perspective, compliance really boils down to three things. It's knowing that you have to do something and when you have to do that. What that thing is you have to do and how to do it, right? And so it's kind of a combination of knowledge and timing. And that is if anyone out there is thinking, well, why should I have to do this? Well, first off, the law says you have to do it. But second off, you don't have to do it. We can do it for you. Yeah. We've built something so that the burden, the sort of cognitive burden, the burden of having to go research, the opportunity costs that we've talked about, you can outsource that to us. And our pricing model and our business model is not to charge for that in any different than you would be paying, another provider for this. It really is, this is money you're spending anyway. Yeah. Let us take technology to make it easier for you so you don't have to worry about it. And so it should be a dead easy decision because you're freeing yourself up by essentially outsourcing this to us who, like I said earlier, have built something to scale that you can take advantage of. And we built it so that you can take advantage of it. That was the idea all along. And we just, love to be able to help people with their problems there.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I loved this conversation. I'm a huge nerd, love compliance, but it is that thing of it has to be done.
Yeah.
The law says it has to be done.
Yeah.
The people who are taking your taxes says it has to be done, but it doesn't have to be done by you.
That's right.
It doesn't have to be done by this one person who's trying to keep this leaning tower of hats centered on their head. So, use your resources, reach out, get help. Technology is at this point. Technology does really well in a box with rules.
Yeah.
And if there's any place that there's a box
there
with rules,
yes,
it's compliance.
That's right.
So, Stacy, Sean, how do people find you? And we'll put these in our show notes as well as the description. But what's the best way to find you and find help?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can obviously, I will give the selfless plug of, you can obviously visit us on our website. So you can find us at singlefile.io or singlefile.ai. Both of those will land to us. We would love to connect on LinkedIn as well. I know many of your listeners obviously are on that platform, and so being able to utilize that resource and stay up to date on some of those key compliance reminders and notices and such, is definitely there. And by visiting our website, you can obviously reach us from our other socials, by email, by phone, so on and so forth. But hopefully most of the information that would be needed can be found there.
Yeah, we do have a phone. I mean, if people want an old-fashioned conversation, we do have a phone line.
We
It's
do.
1-800 number. 1-800-391-9859. Did I get that right?
You did get that right.
Okay. And so, we work with small businesses, large businesses, attorneys, and big firms, large firms, and be happy to help you any way we can.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. There's so much more to cover around this topic, but I really appreciate your time today to spend some time with us to talk about compliance and the importance. As I say, we really want to get the voice of operations out there, because if you don't pay attention to operations and automate things, it impacts your revenues. It can impact your ability for your company to trade and do business in a specific state. It's becoming more complex as a lot of companies become more global.
Sure.
And it's glad to know that there are companies like SingleFile that can really help put that in order. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
No, not at all. We appreciate the opportunity, and both of us enjoyed nerding out as much as you do on this stuff. So thank you.
Anytime. Thank you again, Maria and Katie. We appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Ops or Die, the podcast for all things business operations, with your hosts, Maria Pienaar and Katie Whitcraft. Our theme music, composed by Min Tran, and editing services provided by Troubleshoot Productions. For more information on how to make your operations smart ops, visit www.scalespark.ai.